There comes a moment, quiet and slow, when you begin to sense that something inside you no longer fits. It doesn't announce itself with drama or noise. It comes in subtle shifts. The way a conversation that once thrilled you now feels draining. The way a place you used to love begins to feel unfamiliar. The way your own laughter sounds strange, like it's echoing from someone else's mouth. And you don't know why. Not at first. You just know that the life you're living doesn't feel like yours anymore. You move through your days like an actor in a role you've played for far too long. You know the lines, you hit the cues, but there's no joy in it, no spark, no soul. It's as if you've been living on autopilot, and one day you wake up and realize you don't remember when you started feeling this way. You only know that something has to change, but the change you crave isn't external, it's internal. It's not about quitting your job or moving to a new city or cutting your hair. It's about something deeper, something sacred, the longing to return to yourself. But returning to yourself isn't easy. It's not glamorous. It's not a straight line. It begins in discomfort, in restlessness, in a quiet knowing that the person you've become is only a fraction of who you truly are. You feel the weight of all the compromises, all the swallowed truths, all the dreams you set aside in the name of being realistic. And it hurts. It hurts to see how long you've been living a version of your life that was never meant for you. It hurts to realize that somewhere along the way, you stopped listening to your own voice. You muted it to keep the peace. You buried it to fit in. You ignored it to survive. But now that voice is rising again, not as a scream, but as a whisper that says, "Come back." And that whisper won't go away, no matter how busy you are, no matter how much you try to silence it. It waits for you in the quiet moments, in the space between your thoughts, in the pause between breaths, in the silence that wraps around you just before you fall asleep. This is where the journey begins, not with answers, but with questions, not with confidence, but with curiosity. You begin to ask, not what do others expect of me, but what do I need? Not who do they want me to be, but who am I really? And the answers don't come all at once. Sometimes they don't come in words at all. Sometimes they come in tears, in long walks, in the way your body feels when you say yes to something that doesn't feel right, in the tension in your shoulders, the weight in your chest, the heaviness that follows you like a shadow. Your body knows what your mind has been avoiding. Your soul remembers what you've forgotten. And the more you listen, the more you begin to see the path, not ahead of you, but within you, a path that's been there all along, waiting for you to be ready. There was a man who spent years climbing ladders, career ladders, social ladders, ladders built from other people's definitions of success. And from the outside, he looked like he had it all. But inside, he felt like he was sinking. Each promotion brought more pressure. Each achievement felt emptier than the last. And still, he kept going. Because stopping felt like failure. Until one day, he couldn't go anymore. Not because something broke, but because he did. Quietly, in the middle of a normal day. He found himself staring out a window, unable to remember what he was supposed to be doing. And in that moment, something inside him whispered, "This isn't it." He didn't quit his job that day. He didn't blow up his life. But he did begin to listen. He started waking up early, not to work, but to breathe, to sit in silence, to write down what he felt, and what he felt more than anything was lost. But he let himself feel it. For the first time in years, he didn't push the feeling away. And slowly, through that honesty, something opened. A door back to himself. And on the other side was a life he didn't know he was allowed to want. There was a woman who had spent most of her life trying to be good. Good daughter, good wife, good employee, good friend. She gave and gave until there was nothing left. And still, she kept giving, because that's what she was taught love was. Sacrifice, selflessness, putting everyone else first. She wore her exhaustion like a badge of honor. But beneath the surface, resentment brewed, and guilt, and grief. Grief for all the times she silenced herself. Grief for the dreams she let die. Grief for the woman she might have been. One night, after a long day of tending to everyone else's needs, she sat in her car, parked in the driveway, and wept. not because of anything specific, just because she had finally hit the wall that says, no more. And that night, for the first time, she asked herself, what if I said yes to me? The question felt dangerous, but it also felt like truth. And in the days that followed, she began to make changes, small ones. Saying no, taking breaks, listening to her own desires, and each choice, though terrifying, brought her closer to herself. The return to yourself is not a single act. It's a series of choices. Choosing to listen, choosing to feel, choosing to honor what arises within you, even when it's inconvenient, even when it's messy, even when it doesn't make sense to anyone else. You begin to realize that your peace is not found in perfection, it's found in presence, in being with yourself fully without judgment, in meeting each moment as it is, not as you wish it to be. You stop running, you stop fixing, you stop trying to control everything, and in that surrender, you begin to heal. Not in the way the world taught you healing looks like, but in a way that's deeper, slower, truer. You heal by remembering who you are, by reclaiming the parts of you that were never broken, only buried. And yes, it will feel lonely at times, because when you choose truth, you may lose things, relationships, comfort, familiarity. But what you gain is worth it. You gain yourself, your real self, the one who laughs freely, who feels deeply, who loves without losing herself, the one who trusts her own voice, even when it trembles, the one who walks away when something no longer serves her, not out of bitterness, but out of self-respect. This self is not new. She's ancient. She's eternal. She's been waiting for you to remember. So if you're in the space between who you were and who you're becoming, trust that it's not a void. It's a womb, a place of transformation, a sacred pause before the rebirth. It's okay if it feels uncomfortable. It's okay if you don't have the answers. What matters is that you're listening. What matters is that you've stopped abandoning yourself. And in that choice, everything begins to change. There are days when everything inside you feels heavy and you don't have the language to explain why. The weight doesn't come from a single moment, but from years of accumulating silence, from the words you wanted to say but never did, from the times you smiled when your heart was breaking, from all the times you chose peace outside while creating a storm inside. And eventually the weight becomes too much, not enough to collapse under, but enough to make breathing feel like labor, enough to make joy feel distant, like a language you used to speak fluently but haven't practiced in years. You begin to wonder how you got here, not in your life, but in your spirit. How did you forget what it felt like to feel light? The forgetting didn't happen overnight. It was gradual. You dimmed yourself a little here, compromised a little there, until your truth became a whisper. Until your reflection began to look like a stranger wearing a version of your face. And now, as you stand on the edge of your own rediscovery, you're afraid. Not because you doubt there's something better, but because letting go of the familiar, even when it's painful, is terrifying. We cling to the known, not because it serves us, but because it's predictable. Predictability gives the illusion of safety, but growth has never lived in the arms of certainty. It lives in the unknown, in the quiet rebellion of choosing yourself in a world that benefits from your self-abandonment. There was a man who had mastered the art of detachment. He had learned early on that showing emotion meant vulnerability, and vulnerability meant danger. So he built walls, not high enough to isolate, just strong enough to protect. He could charm a room, lead a team, solve a problem. But when it came to intimacy, he froze. Not because he didn't feel, but because feeling had always been unsafe. He lived a life full of movement, but empty of depth. And eventually, even success began to taste bitter. He reached a point where he couldn't remember the last time he felt joy without earning it. Couldn't remember the last time he cried, or felt awe, or let someone hold him, not physically, but emotionally. One evening, sitting alone in a quiet house, something inside him cracked. He didn't break down. He broke open. He started to revisit old journals. Read things he wrote when he was still soft, still open. And it stunned him, how much of himself he had buried in the name of strength. He remembered the boy who cried easily, who danced without shame, who dreamed out loud. That boy had not died. He had just gone into hiding, and now he was being called back. Slowly he began to soften, not all at once, in moments, in letting his voice shake when he spoke his truth, in allowing silence in conversations instead of filling them with performance, in practicing being loved without having to earn it. It was hard, it was unfamiliar, but it was real, and real, he discovered, was worth the discomfort. There was also a woman who had spent decades making herself palatable. She learned how to be liked, how to blend, how to disappear in plain sight. She dressed the part, spoke the part, lived the part, and it worked. People praised her, admired her, wanted to be near her. But no one really knew her, not even herself, because in the pursuit of being loved, she had betrayed the one person who needed her the most, herself. Her soul began to rebel in small ways. She couldn't finish books, couldn't focus, couldn't find the energy to pretend anymore. She grew quieter, not out of peace but out of fatigue. Her body carried the weight of her denial, and one day during a seemingly ordinary moment, pouring tea, standing barefoot in the kitchen, she broke. The cup fell, tea splashed across the counter, and she sank to the floor weeping. Not for the mess, for the years, the lost time, the lost self. That moment wasn't weakness, it was release. It was her body finally exhaling after holding its breath for years. From that day forward, she began the slow journey back to herself. She bought clothes she liked, not the ones she thought she should wear. She reconnected with a friend she had distanced from out of shame. She let herself write poetry again. And in those small rebellions, she began to live. Not for anyone else, for herself. And it wasn't easy. The old conditioning screamed. But the new voice, her real voice, grew louder with each step. Sometimes healing looks like sitting on the floor of your kitchen, letting yourself fall apart. Sometimes it looks like canceling plans and spending the evening in silence. Sometimes it's laughing too loudly in a quiet room, because for once you feel free. And sometimes it's simply being honest with yourself, saying, I don't have it all together, I'm scared, I'm tired, but I'm here, and I'm trying. That kind of honesty is sacred. It breaks the illusion, it invites truth, and truth, even when it hurts, is the foundation of real healing. You may find that your healing makes others uncomfortable, that your growth disrupts the dynamics you were once a part of. Not everyone will understand the new boundaries you set. Not everyone will clap for the courage it took to choose yourself. Some will call it selfish. Others will call it dramatic. Let them. Their discomfort is not your responsibility. Your responsibility is to your own peace, to your own becoming, to the life that only you can live. And yes, that life may look different. It may be quieter, slower, less crowded, but it will be yours, authentically, entirely, honestly. You are not here to be understood by everyone. You are here to be known, first by yourself, and then by those who can meet you in that truth. The right people won't require you to shrink. They won't ask you to explain your boundaries. They will honor your becoming. They will cheer for your courage. They will sit with you in your silence and still feel connected. And those are the ones worth keeping. So as you walk this path of returning, let yourself grieve. Grieve the time lost, the versions of you that had to perform, the relationships that couldn't survive your truth. But do not stop. Do not turn back. What's ahead is not just a new chapter. It's a new language, a new rhythm, a new way of being. One that doesn't require you to be perfect, only present. One that doesn't demand constant growth, but invites deep rest. One that doesn't judge your pain, but holds it tenderly. That is the life you're stepping into. A life built not on shoulds, but on soul. There is a strange peace that begins to emerge once you stop running, not from the world, not from others, but from yourself. It's not immediate, and it's not loud. It comes in waves, in the way your shoulders start to lower from your ears, in the way you begin to breathe deeper, even without noticing. In the moments where you pause, not because you're lost in thought, but because you're fully here, present, awake, alive. This kind of peace is unfamiliar at first, especially when you've lived your life in survival mode, when you've been conditioned to stay on guard, to read every room before you speak, to measure your worth based on how well you perform. When peace does come, it almost feels uncomfortable, like wearing clothes that don't quite fit yet. But over time, you begin to recognize it not as a threat, but as a homecoming. You begin to understand that you were never meant to live in a constant state of contraction. There was a man who always needed noise, music, podcasts, news, anything to keep the silence away. He said it helped him think, helped him function, but really it helped him avoid, because silence meant feeling, and feeling meant confronting everything he had pushed down over the years. Regret, loneliness, shame, things he didn't have the language to name. But when his phone broke and he was forced to sit in his own stillness, something happened. The first day he panicked. The second day he got angry. The third day he wept. He didn't even know what triggered the tears. They just came, old ancient grief pouring out of a place he didn't know still held pain. And in those tears, he found something he hadn't felt in years. Relief, not because everything was better, but because he had finally stopped pretending. He sat in the silence not as an enemy, but as a guest. And the silence held him, didn't judge him, didn't demand anything. It just allowed him to be. There was also a woman who had learned to measure her worth by her productivity. If she wasn't accomplishing something, she felt useless. Idle time terrified her. She equated stillness with laziness, with failure. So she filled her calendar to the brim, not because she loved being busy, but because being busy meant being valuable. Or so she thought. But her body had a different plan. Exhaustion set in. Not just tiredness, but bone-deep depletion. She would wake up tired, go to sleep anxious. Her nervous system was fried, and when she finally collapsed, it wasn't her fault. It was her body telling the truth her mouth had been too scared to speak. She needed rest. She needed slowness. She needed space. And slowly she began to give it to herself. It wasn't easy. At first, resting felt like failure. Doing nothing felt selfish. But the more she rested, the more she healed. And the more she healed, the more she realized that her worth was never tied to how much she did. It was found in who she was when she finally stopped performing. This is the essence of returning, not to some ideal version of yourself, but to the original you, the one who existed before you were told what to be, the child who laughed without fear of being too loud, who cried without shame, who dreamed without limits. That child still lives in you, and they are waiting, not for perfection, for presence, for your willingness to stop running long enough to sit beside them and say, I see you, I remember you, and I'm sorry I left you behind. That reunion is where healing happens, not in erasing the past, but in integrating it, in making peace with all the versions of yourself that had to do what they did to survive. You don't heal by rejecting your past. You heal by embracing it, by thanking it, by letting it rest. And then something beautiful begins to happen. You start to notice moments of genuine joy, not the kind manufactured by achievements, the kind that comes out of nowhere. Watching sunlight dance on the wall, laughing with a friend, crying during a movie because it touched something true. You begin to feel safe in your body, safe in your solitude, safe in your truth. Not because everything is perfect, but because you no longer require perfection to feel peace. You begin to redefine what strength means, not as resilience through burnout, but as softness in the face of uncertainty, as compassion for yourself on the days you fall short, as the courage to rest even when there's more to do. People may not understand your transformation. They might see you withdrawing and assume you're lost. They may question your new boundaries, your slower pace, your refusal to engage in old dynamics. That's okay. You're not here to be understood by those still committed to their masks. You're here to live truthfully, to be an example of what it means to come home to yourself, to be a lighthouse, not a rescue boat, not someone who saves others, but someone who reminds others that it's okay to be real. And being real will cost you. It will cost you the comfort of being liked, the safety of belonging to spaces that no longer fit, the illusion of control. But what you gain is beyond measure. You gain inner alignment. You gain sovereignty. You gain the kind of self-trust that no external validation can give you. You gain the freedom to show up messy, to speak with a shaky voice, to take up space without apology. And in doing so, you begin to build a life that feels like yours. Not a life that's impressive, a life that's intimate, one where you don't have to earn your right to rest, one where your presence is enough. So take the walk even if it leads nowhere. Sit in the silence even if it's uncomfortable. Say the truth even if your voice shakes. Cry the tears even if you don't know why. These are not signs of weakness. These are signs of returning, of unraveling the layers you wrapped around your heart to keep yourself safe, of remembering that your softness is not a liability, it's a superpower. The world may have told you to be tough, but your soul knows that strength has always been found in gentleness, in kindness, in love. And the more you return to yourself, the less you tolerate what drains you. Not because you're better, but because you're clearer. You begin to discern between what's yours to carry and what never was. You stop trying to fix people who don't want to grow. You stop over-explaining to people committed to misunderstanding you. You let go, not out of resentment, out of self-respect. You finally realize that you were never meant to convince others of your worth. You were meant to believe it for yourself. That belief doesn't come from affirmations alone. It comes from action, from showing up for yourself again and again, from keeping promises to your own heart, from choosing rest even when your mind screams for productivity, from saying no even when guilt creeps in, from allowing joy even when fear tells you it won't last. This is the revolution, not out there, in here, in you, in the quiet, courageous decision to return home. There comes a point in your journey when the need to be seen starts to fade, and the desire to see yourself clearly becomes more important. It's subtle, like the slow change of seasons. You stop reaching for validation like it's oxygen. You stop bending your truth to fit someone else's comfort. And it's not because you've hardened. It's not because you no longer care. It's because you've started to care differently, more inwardly. You've spent years contorting, shape-shifting, performing. You've learned the lines, rehearsed the roles, worn the costumes, and people applauded. They loved the version of you that made sense to them. But deep down, you always knew that version wasn't the whole story. It was only the chapter you let them read. Now you stand in front of yourself without the scripts. You've taken off the costume. And what you see, it surprises you. Not because you're disappointed, but because you forgot how powerful it feels to simply be you. The real you. The one who's scared sometimes. The one who still carries old wounds. The one who doesn't have everything figured out. And yet, despite all that, the one who's still here, trying, showing up, breathing deeper than yesterday. That version of you doesn't need to impress, doesn't need to perform. That version of you just wants to be. And still, there's grief in letting go of who you were. Even if that version of you was built out of survival. Even if that version was never truly at peace. Because for a long time, it kept you safe. It helped you navigate the noise. It gave you something to cling to. So when you begin to let it go, don't be surprised if the sadness rises. Let it. Let it wash over you like rain after a long drought. Let it cleanse you. Let it honor the journey you've taken. You don't have to rush this part. Unbecoming takes time. Shedding skin takes time. And even when you feel ready to fly, there will be moments when the weight of your old self tries to pull you back down. That's not failure. That's gravity. That's memory. That's the body remembering how long it carried armor. There was a man who lived in the rhythm of everyone else's expectations. He wore confidence like a mask, smiling even when he was crumbling inside. He had a good job, a family, friends. But when the quiet came, late at night, alone, he felt hollow, not broken, just detached. He wasn't sad, he wasn't angry, he was numb, and that numbness terrified him. Because he remembered a time when he felt things deeply, when music made him weep, when poetry gave him goosebumps, when he could hold someone's gaze and feel his soul stir. That man was gone, or so he thought, until he started walking every evening, alone with no destination, no phone, no distractions, just silence, just breathe. At first the silence was deafening. His thoughts screamed, his guilt rose, his to-do list haunted him. But he kept walking, and one day during a walk under a sky blushed with sunset, He paused, just paused, and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Stillness. Not forced stillness. Natural stillness. A quiet knowing that for that moment, everything was okay. And he cried. Not because of pain, because of remembrance. He remembered who he was before the world told him who to be. He remembered the version of himself that didn't need approval to feel alive. And from that day forward, he began to rebuild, not his life, but his connection to it. There was also a woman who had mastered the art of being invisible, not because she lacked brilliance, but because her brilliance made others uncomfortable. She learned early on that being too much was dangerous, that speaking too loudly, laughing too freely, dreaming too boldly, made her a target. So she dimmed. She chose smallness as safety. She became agreeable, predictable, pleasant, and people loved her for it. But deep down she was dying, not dramatically, silently. Piece by piece, she lost touch with her own voice. Until one day she found a letter she wrote to herself at 16, a list of things she wanted, things she believed in, things she swore she'd never compromise. And as she read the words, something inside her snapped. She had forgotten that version of herself, buried her, replaced her. But now she remembered, and in that remembrance, something ignited. She began to speak again, not just in words, but in choices. She changed her job, not because it was bad, but because it didn't let her shine. She left a relationship that felt like a cage. She started painting again, filling her walls with color and chaos and joy. She stopped apologizing for being too much, and for the first time, she felt free, terrified, uncertain, but free. And she understood then that authenticity wasn't a luxury, it was a necessity, that to live a life that feels like yours, you have to risk being misunderstood. That risk is real. When you choose yourself, not everyone will applaud. Some will pull away, some will call you selfish, some will weaponize your truth against you. But you must remember their reactions are not your responsibility. Your responsibility is to stay anchored in your own heart, to stay faithful to your own unfolding. You're not here to live someone else's version of peace. You're not here to be palatable to people who only love you in pieces. You're here to be whole, to be honest, to be human. Healing is not a staircase you climb one step at a time. It's a spiral. You'll revisit the same lessons, the same wounds, again and again, each time from a deeper place, each time with more compassion, more awareness, more grace. You'll think you've moved on from something, and then it'll rise again, uninvited, inconvenient, intense. That's not regression, that's integration. That's your soul saying, we're not done here, not yet. There's still something to learn, something to release. Don't rush those moments. Don't resent them. Bow to them. Learn from them. Let them make you tender. And in that tenderness, you'll find your power. Not the kind of power that dominates, the kind that holds space, the kind that says, I see you to your fear, your shame, your longing, the kind that doesn't need to shout to be heard. That kind of power can't be stolen. It can't be faked. It comes from having walked through your own fire and returned with stories, not scars. It comes from loving yourself in the middle of your mess, not after you've cleaned it up. It comes from choosing presence over perfection, again and again and again. So if you're tired, rest. If you're grieving, let it rise. If you're lost, stand still. You don't have to fix it. You don't have to force clarity. Just be here. Just feel. Just trust that your soul knows the way, even when your mind is full of doubt, especially then, because healing doesn't happen when you understand everything. It happens when you stop running from what's real. It happens when you sit in the dark long enough to realize your eyes have adjusted, that there's beauty there, wisdom there, God there. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are becoming. And becoming is sacred. Becoming is wild. Becoming is yours. So breathe, trust, and keep choosing yourself. One small, brave moment at a time. There are times when you'll feel like you're unraveling, not in chaos, not in pain, but in surrender. You'll be walking through your day and suddenly realize you don't care about the things you used to chase. The urgency is gone. the need to prove, to impress, to explain. It fades like a storm that spent years circling your heart and finally ran out of thunder. It's unsettling at first, this new stillness, because for so long, your identity was built on the noise, on the hustle, on being someone to someone else. But now that identity begins to dissolve. The old you, the one who lived by patterns and praise, starts slipping away. And what remains is the question, who am I when I'm no longer who I used to be? This question won't be answered with a quote or a book or someone else's advice. It won't come from scrolling through curated perfection or chasing spiritual highs. It will come slowly, like the way dawn touches the earth. Not all at once, but in slivers of light that make everything softer. The answer's in your breath, in your pauses, in the way your chest rises when you're honest with yourself, in the way your body exhales when you stop lying. That's where you find the truth, not in loud declarations, in the quiet return to your center, to the self that exists beneath the mass, the self you buried to survive, the one who never needed to be fixed, only remembered. There was a man who had built his entire world around being needed. He was the problem solver, the one who always showed up, the one who had the answers. And it gave him purpose. It gave him identity. But it also left him empty, because being needed is not the same as being known. Being useful is not the same as being loved. He realized this during a conversation with his daughter. She had asked him, "Why don't you ever tell me when you're sad?" And he didn't know how to answer, because sadness, for him, was shameful, a weakness. He had spent so many years hiding it, even from himself, that he couldn't remember what it felt like to be held, rather than hold. That night he sat alone and cried, not because of pain, but because of longing. Longing to be seen not as a savior, but as a soul. He began the slow process of learning how to receive. He let his friends into the parts of him he used to protect. He stopped saying, "I'm fine," when he wasn't. He let his tears fall in front of people who deserved to see them. And something shifted. He wasn't less respected. He was more connected. The walls he had built to keep himself safe had also kept out intimacy. And now as those walls crumbled, something tender grew in their place. Not perfection, not certainty, just truth. And that truth allowed love to enter in ways he'd never known before. There was a woman who had mastered the art of holding space for others. She was the friend everyone called when they were falling apart. She always knew the right thing to say, always made others feel seen, but no one noticed when she started to disappear. Not because they didn't care, but because she never let them see her bleeding. She wore her strength like armor and her silence like a crown. And for a while that was enough, until it wasn't. One afternoon, after holding space for yet another person's heartbreak, she went home and collapsed on her bedroom floor. She wasn't just tired, she was soul tired. And for the first time in her life, she said aloud, "I need someone to hold me." That admission cracked something open. She began reaching out, not with answers, but with questions. She asked her friends to meet her in her mess. She began going to therapy. She let herself be supported. And in that support, she found a different kind of strength, a softer strength, a feminine strength, the kind that doesn't come from fixing, but from feeling. The kind that doesn't demand performance, but invites presence. And she realized something sacred. Holding space for others is beautiful, but holding space for yourself is holy. And the ones who truly love you will never require you to choose between the two. When you start to choose yourself, truly, unapologetically, life will shift. Not because everything around you changes, but because your relationship to yourself transforms. You begin to walk differently, speak differently, breathe differently, not louder, not bolder, just deeper, more rooted, more you. And as your energy shifts, so will your surroundings. Some people will no longer resonate. Some dreams will no longer inspire. Some places will no longer feel like home. And it's okay to grieve that. It's okay to feel the ache of letting go, even when you know it's right. Because shedding doesn't mean forgetting. It means honoring. It means blessing what was, while making room for what's to come. You'll also find new beauty. Beauty that was always there but hidden beneath your busyness. the way sunlight dances on your wall in the morning, the way tea tastes when you're not rushing, the sound of your own breath when you actually listen to it, the softness of your voice when you speak your truth, not to convince, but to connect. You'll discover that joy doesn't always roar. Sometimes it hums, sometimes it sighs, sometimes it arrives quietly in the middle of a conversation where your guard is down and your soul feels safe. You begin to understand that this journey isn't about becoming someone different. It's about coming home to your essence, to your rhythm, to the version of you that exists when no one is watching. That version doesn't need applause, she just needs space. She just needs safety, she just needs your permission to exist fully without shame. And with that permission comes a quiet revolution. You start saying no without guilt. You start saying yes without fear. You stop seeking closure from people who never offered clarity. You stop participating in cycles that drain your spirit. You begin to protect your peace, not like a fortress, but like a garden, with boundaries, with tenderness, with intention. And in that garden, you bloom, not for the world, but for yourself. Let people misunderstand you. Let them question your choices. Let them gossip, guess, assume. That's their path. Yours is deeper, quieter, richer. Yours is not about explaining, it's about embodying, living in a way that feels like truth, speaking in a way that feels like liberation, loving in a way that feels like home. Because at the end of the day, this is what we all want. Not perfection, not constant happiness, but truth, realness. To wake up in the morning and know that we are living a life that feels honest, that we are surrounded by people who see us, that we are treating ourselves with the same care we so willingly give to others. And when that becomes your standard, everything changes. You stop asking for permission. You stop waiting for the right time. You realize that you are the right time. You are the doorway. You are the invitation. And your life is the sacred ceremony. There is a kind of freedom that doesn't come with grand declarations or bold decisions. It comes quietly, in moments so ordinary they almost go unnoticed. Like the day you realize you no longer feel the need to respond to every message right away. Or when you pause before saying yes and ask yourself if you really want to. It's subtle, this kind of freedom. It doesn't scream, it whispers, and yet it carries the weight of years. Years of people-pleasing, years of abandoning your own needs to maintain peace, years of measuring your worth in how useful, agreeable, or accommodating you could be. When that kind of freedom arrives, it's not always euphoric. Sometimes it feels like grief. Sometimes it feels like confusion. Because so much of your identity was built on being everything to everyone. And now you're choosing to be everything to yourself. It doesn't make you selfish. It makes you whole. But wholeness can be uncomfortable when you're used to being fragmented. When you're used to giving away your time, your energy, your attention, without pausing to ask, what do I need? That pause, it changes everything. It invites awareness. It invites presence. It invites the possibility that your life doesn't have to be dictated by urgency, by obligation, by the expectations of others. It invites you to rewrite the script, not for anyone else, but for yourself. And that kind of rewriting takes courage, because it means letting go of the praise that came with self-denial. It means walking away from relationships that depended on your silence. It means risking being misunderstood. But it also means choosing peace over performance. And that choice, it's everything. There was a man who had built his life on achievement. He had the accolades, the success, the admiration, but beneath it all, he was exhausted. Not physically, existentially. He had spent so much time chasing goals that he had forgotten how to rest, how to be still, how to feel. Until one day after another long night at the office, he came home, sat in the dark, and whispered to no one in particular, I don't want this anymore. Not the job, not the image, not the pressure. And it wasn't burnout speaking, it was truth. A truth he had buried beneath ambition. A truth that had been waiting patiently, quietly, for him to slow down long enough to listen. He didn't quit his job the next day. He didn't dismantle his life overnight, but he did start waking up early, not to check emails, but to check in with himself. He began journaling, meditating, asking hard questions. And the answers weren't always clear, but the more he listened, the more he realized that he didn't want a bigger life. He wanted a truer one with space for wonder, one with room for breath, one where success was measured not by the weight of his responsibilities, but by the lightness in his soul. And so, little by little, he changed, not to become someone new, to become someone honest. There was also a woman who had spent years living for others. Every decision she made was filtered through the lens of, what will they think? She dressed a certain way, spoke a certain way, dreamed within limits, and it worked until it didn't, until the anxiety became too loud, until the joy felt too far, until her reflection in the mirror felt like a stranger. And that's when she stopped. Not out of rebellion, out of necessity. She stopped attending events that drained her, stopped explaining her choices to people who never truly listened, stopped apologizing for her emotions. And in that stopping, something started, her life. She began to dance again, barefoot in her living room, with no one watching. She began writing poetry, not to publish, just to feel. She took long walks, let herself cry, let herself laugh without restraint. And for the first time, she felt like she was living in color after years of grayscale. Not because everything was perfect, but because everything was hers. Her pace, her voice, her truth. And in claiming that, she discovered a new kind of love, not from others, but from within. A love that didn't need to be earned. A love that didn't waver when she was messy. A love that held her through every season. This kind of self-love is radical. Not because it's loud, but because it's rooted. It doesn't seek attention, it seeks alignment. It doesn't need validation, it needs embodiment. And embodiment doesn't happen in your mind, it happens in your body, in your breath, in the way you choose to stay present even when discomfort arises. It happens when you let yourself feel everything you use to numb. The anger, the grief, the joy, the tenderness. It all belongs. And the more you allow it, the more you realize that healing was never about fixing what was broken. It was about remembering what was buried. You begin to see your triggers differently, not as problems, but as portals, invitations to look deeper, to ask, what is this really about? And often the answer surprises you. It's not about the comment, not about the situation. It's about the unhealed wound beneath it, the part of you that still believes you have to prove your worth, the part of you that still fears abandonment, the part of you that still confuses love with sacrifice. And when you meet those parts with compassion, not judgment, sometimes it looks like canceling plans because your soul needs silence. Sometimes it looks like walking away from people who love you because they cannot meet you where you're going. Sometimes it looks like grieving a version of yourself you thought you were supposed to be. And all of that is okay. All of that is valid, because the path to becoming is paved with unbecoming, with letting go, with releasing the version of yourself that was shaped by survival so you can step into the one shaped by truth. You don't have to have it all figured out. You don't need a 5-year plan. You don't need to justify your desires to anyone. You are allowed to change. You are allowed to grow. You are allowed to want different things than you did last year. You are allowed to disappoint people in order to stay true to yourself. You are allowed to choose peace, even if it looks like failure from the outside. Because only you live inside your skin. Only you hear the whispers of your soul. And your soul doesn't care about being impressive. It cares about being free. So honor the space you're in. Even if it's messy, even if it's uncertain, especially if it's uncertain. Because uncertainty means you are no longer numbing. It means you are awake. It means you are asking the right questions. And those questions, the ones that don't have easy answers, will carry you into the life you're meant to live. A life that feels like breath, like ease, like coming home. There are mornings when you wake up and everything feels unfamiliar, even your own reflection. You look into the mirror and see the same face, the same eyes, the same skin. But something's different. Not on the surface, deeper. Something has shifted inside you, and though you can't quite name it, you feel it in the way you breathe, in the way you pause before speaking, in the way your heart aches with a kind of tenderness that wasn't there before. You've outgrown something. Maybe it's the version of you that smiled through pain just to keep the peace. Maybe it's the version of you that made yourself small to avoid judgment. Or maybe it's the person who lived for others because you didn't yet believe you were enough. Whatever it is, it's no longer who you are. And though there's grief in letting go of the familiar, there's also freedom. Because finally, you're beginning to understand that you don't have to become someone else to be worthy of love. You only need to become more of yourself. Growth isn't always a climb. Sometimes it's a shedding. You don't just rise into a new version of yourself. You strip away everything that was built out of fear, the defensiveness, the perfectionism, the obsession with being understood, the exhausting need to prove your worth. As each layer falls away, you find something quieter underneath, something softer, more vulnerable, more honest. That's your real self, the one who knows that joy doesn't come from control, but from surrender. The one who no longer needs to chase validation because you've finally chosen yourself. And choosing yourself is not selfish. It's sacred. It's what allows you to love others without losing your own center. It's what allows you to give without resentment, to serve without exhaustion, to care without compromising your truth. There was a woman who had spent her entire life seeking approval. She had mastered the art of becoming whoever the moment required, charming in social settings, responsible at work, agreeable in relationships. And it worked. People liked her, admired her. But late at night, when the world went quiet, she would lie in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering if anyone really knew her. Not the polished version, the real her, the one with messy emotions and unspoken dreams. She realized that in all her efforts to be liked, she had forgotten what it meant to be seen, truly seen. And that realization gutted her, because she had surrounded herself with people who loved her mask, not her face, her performance, not her presence. That moment broke something open, not in a loud, dramatic way, in a quiet, irreversible one. She stopped answering messages out of obligation. She started speaking honestly, even when her voice shook. She let herself rest, let herself rage, let herself want. And to her surprise, the world didn't end. Some people drifted away, yes, but new people showed up. People who saw her, not in spite of her truth, but because of it. People who didn't need her to perform, who didn't flinch when she cried, who didn't pull away when she was too much. She began to understand that the love she had always longed for wasn't out there. It was in the moments she chose not to abandon herself. There was also a man who had lived most of his life by the book. He did everything right, got the degrees, married young, built the career, raised the family. And yet, in the quiet spaces of his day, he felt hollow. Not because he had made the wrong choices, but because he had never asked himself what he truly wanted.